Story 1. Gary Lee Roll was born on November 22, 1952. He grew up in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. His family was well respected in the community. They were known as hardworking people. Gary's brother later became a special agent for the FBI in Kansas City. Gary did not have a difficult childhood. He was not abused. He did not face major trauma while growing up. Gary attended Cape Girardeau Central High School. He graduated in 1969. One of his classmates was Rush Limbaugh, who later became a famous radio host. After high school, Gary went to Southeast Missouri State University. He studied there for several years. He came very close to earning his college degree. He was only 10 hours short of graduation. But Gary did not finish college. Instead, he decided to leave school. He volunteered to join the United States Army. This happened during the Vietnam War. He was sent to Germany for his military service. While he was stationed in Germany, he had a medical problem. 6 of his teeth became impacted. That means they could not come through the gum properly. An Army oral surgeon removed all 6 teeth at one time. During that surgery, the doctor damaged a nerve in Gary's lower mouth. After the surgery, Gary felt constant, severe pain in his jaw, chin, gums, and lower face. The pain did not go away. It changed his life completely. He could not keep a normal social life. The pain made it hard for him to work. He was honorably discharged from the Army on September 7, 1974. The government gave him a 50% service-connected disability because of the nerve damage. Gary tried to get help from Veterans Administration hospitals. In 1977, he had 2 more surgeries to try to stop the pain. Doctors performed a right mental neurectomy on June 24, 1977. That means they removed part of the nerve that gives feeling to the face. Then they performed a bilateral mental neurectomy. That means they removed nerve parts from both sides of his jaw. But these surgeries did not stop the pain. The pain actually got worse and spread to other parts of his face and neck. For many years, doctors gave Gary strong pain medications. These included narcotics like Demerol and anti-anxiety drugs. But none of the medicines worked well for very long. Gary became worried about becoming addicted to the drugs. In early 1992, he checked himself into a hospital. He stayed there as a patient to stop taking the narcotics. He was able to get off those medications. In March of 1992, Gary was working on the roof of his house. He fell off the roof. He broke his ankle badly. The joint where the long bones come together split open. Doctors said the injury might never heal fully. Gary was in pain again from this new injury. The hospital put him back on narcotic pain medications. This started a downward spiral for him. Gary had been married, but his marriage did not last. His wife divorced him in 1991. One of the reasons for the divorce was his drug use. Gary began using illegal drugs to try to manage his pain. He used marijuana. He also used LSD, which is a strong hallucinogenic drug. He found that these street drugs gave him some relief that the prescription drugs did not provide. Before the events that would happen later, Gary Lee Roll had no criminal record. He had never been convicted of any crime. He was a military veteran who had served his country and then struggled for years with chronic pain. On the night of August 8, 1992, Gary Lee Roll was with 2 other men. Their names were David Rhodes and John Brown. Rhodes and Brown were teenagers. All 3 men had been drinking alcohol. They had also smoked marijuana. Roll had taken 4 to 6 hits of LSD. The LSD made his thinking very confused and impaired. His judgment was severely damaged by the drugs. At some point during the night, the 3 men decided to rob a drug dealer. Roll gave each of the other men a gun and a knife. Roll drove them to the home of a person they believed sold drugs. Roll tried to force open the front door of that house, but a child inside the house cried out when they heard the noise. Rhodes and Brown then refused to go inside the house. So all 3 men left and went back to Roll's house. Later that same night, they decided to rob a different drug dealer. That dealer was a 17-year-old boy named Randy Shepper. Randy lived with his mother, Sherry Shepper, who was 47 years old, and his older brother, Curtis Shepper, who was 22 years old. John Brown knew the Shepper family. That fact would become important later. At about 4 o'clock in the morning on August 9th, 1992, Roll drove his car to the Shepper family home. Rhodes and Brown were with him. Roll got out of the car and walked to the front door. He knocked on the door. Sherry Shepper, the mother, came to answer the door. Roll was holding a badge. He told Sherry that he was a police officer. He ordered her to open the door. She believed him and opened the door. Roll and Rhodes entered the house. Brown stayed outside. He was afraid that someone inside would recognize him because he knew the family. Once inside, Roll ordered Sherry and her son Randy to lie face down on the carpet. They obeyed because they thought Roll was a police officer. Roll then became afraid. He thought the Shepper family could identify him later. He later explained that he killed them because they knew everybody, and he figured they might know him because of something that was said inside the house. So he decided to kill them. Roll took his handgun. He shot 17-year-old Randy Shepper in the head. Randy died from that gunshot wound. Then Roll took the same handgun and beat Sherry Shepper with it. He hit her repeatedly until she died. The gun was the weapon used to beat her to death. Then either Roll or one of the accomplices, David Rhodes, took a hunting knife. They stabbed Curtis Shepper, the 22-year-old brother, with that knife. Curtis died from the stab wounds. All 3 members of the Shepper family who were home that night were murdered. The 3 men then took items from the house. They took about 12 plastic sandwich bags that were filled with marijuana. They also took $215 in cash. After the murders, Roll, Rhodes, and Brown left the house and drove back to Roll's home. When they arrived, Roll cleaned his gun. He washed blood and hair off the weapon. He also cleaned blood off his knife and his clothing. Then he wrapped the murder weapons and a box of ammunition together in a package. He gave that package to his son. His son buried the package in the woods behind Roll's house. Roll believed the evidence was hidden and would not be found. In the weeks that followed the murders, John Brown became very afraid. He was scared for his own safety. He worried that Roll might harm him. Brown decided to protect himself. He got a tape recorder. He wore the recorder hidden on his body during a conversation with Roll. In that conversation, Brown asked Roll about the murders. Roll admitted on the tape that he had committed the killings. He also admitted that he had gotten rid of the murder weapons. Roll said on the tape that he killed the Sheppers because he believed they could identify him. Brown kept the tape. He did not go to the police right away. Instead, he gave the tape to a friend for safekeeping. The friend who received the tape from John Brown decided to act. That friend did not keep the tape hidden. Instead, the friend turned the tape over to the police. This happened several weeks after the murders. The police now had a recording of Gary Lee Roll admitting to the 3 killings. They also had Roll admitting that he hid the murder weapons in the woods behind his house. Police officers went to the woods behind Roll's home. They searched the area. They found the buried package that Roll's son had put in the ground. Inside the package were the handgun, the hunting knife, the box of ammunition, and other items from the night of the murders. These were important pieces of physical evidence. The weapons and the tape recording together gave the police strong proof of what had happened. In November 1992, the police arrested Gary Lee Roll. They also arrested David Rhodes and John Brown. All 3 men were charged with the murders of Sherry, Randy, and Curtis Shepper. The case was moved to a different location for trial. Because the crimes happened in Cape Girardeau, the court changed the venue to Boone County. This was done to make sure the trial was fair and not affected by local publicity. Gary Roll decided not to go to trial before a jury. He also decided to plead guilty. His lawyer advised him to do this. On August 30th, 1993, Roll tried to enter his guilty plea, but there was a problem with the process that day. However, he eventually pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. He also pleaded guilty to 3 counts of armed criminal action and 1 count of robbery. He did not have a plea agreement with the prosecutors. That means he pleaded guilty without any promise of a lesser sentence. The prosecutors were still asking for the death penalty. The judge heard the case because Roll waived his right to a jury. The judge listened to the evidence. The judge considered the facts of the murders. He also considered that Roll had no prior criminal history. That was the only factor the judge listed as reducing Roll's blame. The judge did not accept Roll's drug use or his pain as reasons to lessen the punishment. The judge believed the law did not allow him to consider voluntary intoxication as a mitigating factor. On November 16, 1993, the judge sentenced Gary Lee Roll to death on each of the 3 murder counts. He was sent to death row at the Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri. David Rhodes also pleaded guilty. He was convicted of second-degree murder and received 3 consecutive life sentences. John Brown pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder. He received a life sentence. Both of Roll's accomplices were not sentenced to death. Roll appealed his death sentence. The Missouri Supreme Court reviewed the case and affirmed, or upheld, the death sentence in 1997. Roll's lawyers later filed federal appeals. They argued that Roll's trial lawyer did not do a good job. They said the lawyer did not investigate Roll's mental state or his history of pain and drug addiction. They also said the lawyer wrongly told Roll he would not get the death penalty if he pleaded guilty. But the courts did not reverse the sentence. Roll asked the Missouri governor for clemency. That means he asked to have his death sentence changed to life in prison. His lawyers explained his painful medical history, his service in the Army, his disability, and his lack of prior crimes. The governor did not grant clemency. On August 30th, 2000, at 12:07 in the morning, Gary Lee Roll was executed by lethal injection at the prison in Potosi, Missouri. He was 47 years old. Before he died, he gave a final statement. He said he failed his family. He also expressed remorse to the Shepard family. He hoped they could forgive him. After the execution, the case of the 3 Shepard family murders was closed. Sherry, Randy, and Curtis Shepard had been killed on August 9, 1992, and 8 years later, the man who admitted to killing them was put to death by the state of Missouri. Story 2. Jeffrey Henry Caldwell was born on March 1, 1963, in Chicago, Illinois. He was the 3rd child of Henry Porter Caldwell, Jr. and Gwendolyn Caldwell. His father worked to support the family. His mother took care of the home and the children. Jeffrey had brothers, including one named Henry Caldwell III, and he had a younger sister named Kimberly. Jeffrey grew up in a busy household. His parents tried to raise their children with rules and discipline, but Jeffrey began to have problems at a young age. He started stealing things when he was still a child. One of his brothers, Henry, later said that Jeffrey began stealing very early in life. This was a red flag, but at the time the family did not stop it completely. When Jeffrey became a teenager, his behavior got worse. He went to high school. A friend from that time, Lewis Gibson, said that Jeffrey would break into lockers at school. He would also break into cars. He did this to get money. The money was used to buy drugs. Jeffrey also sold drugs. He often carried a .38 revolver. This was a gun. He carried it for protection and to feel powerful. The school authorities noticed Jeffrey's bad behavior. An assistant principal said that Jeffrey admitted to stealing a wallet from someone at school. Later, the school suspended Jeffrey for having marijuana. Marijuana is an illegal drug. The school did not want him there with drugs. In 1980, when Jeffrey was 17 years old, the Caldwell family moved from Chicago to Dallas, Texas. They bought a home in South Dallas. The family hoped that a new start would help Jeffrey. But the move did not change his habits. He continued to steal and use drugs. In 1983, when Jeffrey was 20 years old, he was caught for burglary. Burglary means breaking into a building to steal things. He was convicted, which means a court found him guilty. He received a sentence of 5 years in prison. But he did not serve all 5 years. Because of prison rules at that time in Texas, prisoners were often released early. Jeffrey served 15 months of his 5-year sentence. After he got out of prison, Jeffrey did not stop committing crimes. In 1986, he was convicted of robbery. Robbery is different from burglary. Robbery means taking something from a person by using force or fear. For this crime, he received a sentence of 10 years in prison. He served 1.5 years of that sentence. Again, he was released early. In April 1988, Jeffrey was released on parole. Parole means he was allowed to leave prison early, but had to follow rules. He had to report to a parole officer. He had to stay out of trouble. He had to follow conditions set by the state. His parole officer later said that Jeffrey repeatedly failed to meet those conditions. He did not show up for meetings. He did not follow the rules. After getting out on parole, Jeffrey went back to live with his parents and his sister Kimberly in the family home in South Dallas. He did not have a steady job. He did not have his own money. He relied on his parents for a place to sleep and for food. His father, Henry Porter Caldwell Jr., was still working. His mother, Gwendolyn, kept the house. His sister Kimberly was 19 years old. She was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Jeffrey had a daughter. He loved his daughter, but he was not able to care for her properly because of his crimes and his drug use. He was not a stable presence in her life. Between April 1988 and July 1988, Jeffrey lived in the family home. He was 25 years old. He had been in prison twice. He had been released on parole for less than 4 months. He had no job. He had no money of his own. He asked his father for money. He asked his mother for money. Sometimes they gave him some. Sometimes they said no. There was tension in the house. Jeffrey felt angry when he did not get what he wanted. One of his friends from high school, a man named Terrence Strange, said that Jeffrey would take him to health clubs. At these clubs, Jeffrey would break into lockers and steal money. Jeffrey also took stolen jewelry from Strange and pawned it. Pawning means selling items to a shop for quick cash. Jeffrey knew how to turn stolen goods into money. Jeffrey also had a friend in jail with him at one point before the murders. That friend later said that Jeffrey talked about killing people. But Jeffrey said he was good at hiding things. He believed he could get away with crimes if he was careful. By late July 1988, the situation in the Caldwell home was not peaceful. Jeffrey wanted money. His father and mother were tired of giving him money. His sister Kimberly was living her own life. There was arguing. There was anger. Jeffrey had access to knives and other tools in the house. He had a history of violence, including carrying a gun and beating up people. One friend, Lewis Gibson, said that Jeffrey once beat him up just for being scheduled to testify in court. Jeffrey was not afraid to use his hands or a weapon. Jeffrey's brother Henry Caldwell, 3, was not living at the family home at this time. He had his own place. So on the night of July 25th, 1988, the only people in the South Dallas house were Jeffrey, his father Henry Jr., his mother Gwendolyn, and his sister Kimberly. That night, something happened inside that house. No one else saw it. No one heard it from the outside. The neighbors did not report any screams or loud noises. Whatever happened, it was quick and it was quiet. And when it was over, 3 people were dead, and Jeffrey was the only one left alive in the house. On the night of July 25th, 1988, Jeffrey Caldwell was inside the family home in South Dallas with his father Henry Porter Caldwell Jr., his mother Gwendolyn Caldwell, and his sister Kimberly Caldwell. The house was quiet. The neighbors did not hear any loud sounds. Jeffrey later gave different stories about what happened that night. But the physical evidence and the autopsies showed what really took place. Jeffrey had an argument with his father. The argument was about money. Jeffrey wanted his father to give him money. His father had given money to Kimberly, Jeffrey's sister. Jeffrey thought this was unfair. He believed he deserved the money more than she did. The argument grew heated. Jeffrey became angry. He did not control his anger. During the argument, Jeffrey got a knife. The knife was a butcher knife. It was a large blade used for cutting meat. The knife was kept in the family's kitchen. Jeffrey went to the kitchen, opened a drawer or a block, and took the knife. He also got a hammer. The hammer was a claw hammer, the kind used to drive nails into wood or to pull them out. Jeffrey carried both weapons. Jeffrey first attacked his father, Henry Porter Caldwell, Jr. He used the butcher knife to stab his father once in the chest. The knife went deep. It went through the ribs and into the heart. A stab through the heart stops the heart from pumping blood. Death happens very quickly. After stabbing his father, Jeffrey also hit his father on the head with the hammer. The hammer was a blunt instrument. Blunt means not sharp. Being hit on the head with a hammer causes the skull to crack or break. It also causes bleeding inside the brain. Jeffrey's father died from the stab wound to the heart. The hammer blows were extra injuries. Next, Jeffrey attacked his mother, Gwendolyn Caldwell. He used the same butcher knife. He stabbed her once in the chest. The knife went through her heart as well. Then he hit her on the head with the hammer. The hammer blows to the head caused injuries to her skull and brain. His mother died from the stab wound to the heart. Then Jeffrey attacked his sister, Kimberly Caldwell. She was 19 years old. She tried to get away or defend herself. But Jeffrey was faster and stronger. He stabbed her twice in the chest. One of those stab wounds went through her heart. He also hit her on the head with the hammer. The hammer strikes caused injuries to her skull. Kimberly died from the stab wound to her heart. After all three family members were dead, Jeffrey did not call for help. He did not tell anyone what he had done. Instead, he tried to hide the bodies. He found blankets in the house. He wrapped each body in a blanket. He wrapped his father's body first. Then he wrapped his mother's body. Then he wrapped his sister's body. The blankets covered the wounds and the blood. Jeffrey then took the bodies outside. Behind the family's house, there was a camper trailer. A camper trailer is a small vehicle that people use for camping. It has a door and space inside to sleep. The camper trailer was parked behind the South Dallas home. Jeffrey opened the door of the camper trailer. He pushed his father's body inside. He pushed his mother's body inside. He pushed his sister's body inside. He stuffed all three bodies into the camper trailer. He closed the door. The inside of the house still had blood. Jeffrey tried to clean up. He wiped some surfaces. But he did not clean everything. He left the house. He took his mother's car. The car was a vehicle that belonged to Gwendolyn Caldwell. Jeffrey drove away in that car. He did not tell anyone where he was going. For the next 2 days, no one saw the Caldwell family outside their home. Neighbors noticed that the family was not there. They did not see Henry Jr. going to work. They did not see Gwendolyn in the yard. They did not see Kimberly. They did not see Jeffrey either. The house was dark at night. The car was missing from the driveway. The only thing that stayed in place was the camper trailer parked behind the house. The bodies stayed inside the camper trailer for 2 days. The temperature in Dallas in July is very hot. The heat made the bodies begin to decompose. Decompose means to break down and smell bad. After 2 days, a bad smell started to come from the camper trailer. The smell was strong. It was the smell of death. Jeffrey did not return to the house during those 2 days. He was driving his mother's car. He had money from somewhere. He later told people different stories. One story was that he had stolen drugs from Jamaican drug dealers. Another story was that the murders were an accident. But at the time, right after the killings, he only cared about getting away. The victims suffered greatly. Henry Porter Caldwell, Jr. was 47 years old. He was a father who worked to support his family. He died in his own home, attacked by his own son. Gwendolyn Caldwell was 46 years old. She was a mother who raised her children. She died in her home, also attacked by her son. Kimberly Caldwell was 19 years old. She was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. She did nothing wrong. She was killed because she was in the house when her brother became angry. The weapons used were the butcher knife and the claw hammer. After the murders, Jeffrey cleaned the knife and the hammer. He put them back somewhere in the house. He did not throw them away. He thought no one would find out. He thought he could hide the bodies and leave town. He thought he would not get caught. But he made mistakes. He left blood in the house. He left the bodies in the camper trailer behind the house. He took his mother's car, which people would recognize. He did not tell anyone where he was going. And most importantly, someone was going to check on the family soon. Jeffrey's brother, Henry Caldwell III, was not living at the family home. He had not seen his parents or his sister for a few days. He tried to call them. No one answered the phone. He went to the house to check on them. When he arrived, he noticed that something was wrong. On July 27, 1988, 2 days after the murders, Henry Caldwell III went to check on his family. He had not seen his parents or his sister for 2 days. Neighbors told him they had not seen the family either. Henry went to the South Dallas house. He walked inside. The house was empty. No one was there. But Henry noticed something strange. There was a bad smell coming from outside. He followed the smell to the camper trailer parked behind the house. Henry opened the door of the camper trailer. Inside, he found 3 bodies wrapped in blankets. He recognized his father, his mother, and his sister. They were dead. Henry called the police immediately. The Dallas police arrived at the scene. They saw the camper trailer with the 3 bodies. They entered the house and saw signs of cleaning. But they also saw blood that Jeffrey had missed. The police collected evidence. They took the butcher knife and the hammer. They took samples of blood. They photographed everything. The medical examiner later performed autopsies. The autopsies showed that each victim had been stabbed in the chest and beaten on the head. The cause of death for all 3 was the stab wound to the heart. The police asked family members who might have done this. Henry Caldwell III told them about his brother Jeffrey. He said Jeffrey had been living in the house. He said Jeffrey had a criminal record. He said Jeffrey had been angry about money. The police also noticed that Gwendolyn Caldwell's car was missing from the driveway. They put out a description of the car to other police officers. The next day, July 28, 1988, police officers found Jeffrey Caldwell. He was in a telephone booth. A telephone booth is a small box on the street with a public phone. Jeffrey was using the phone to call his brother Henry. The police arrested him right there. He was driving his mother's car. The car was parked near the phone booth. After the arrest, Jeffrey agreed to give a voluntary statement. That means he was not forced to talk. He chose to speak to the police. In his first statement, he said he had an argument with his father about money for insulin. Insulin is a medicine for diabetes. He said his father refused to give him money. He said that during the argument, all 3 family members accidentally fell onto his knife. The police did not believe this story. The autopsies showed stab wounds straight into the heart, not accidental falls. Also, the hammer blows to the head could not happen from falling on a knife. Later, Jeffrey signed a written statement. In that statement, he admitted he had lied about the insulin. He said there was actually insulin in the family's refrigerator. He did not need money for insulin. He changed his story again. He said the argument was just about money. He admitted he stabbed them, but he still said it was an accident. While Jeffrey was in jail waiting for his trial, he talked to a friend who was also in jail. Jeffrey told that friend that he killed his parents. He said he was so good at hiding the crime that he would not be convicted. The friend later told this to the prosecutors. The trial began in 1989. The prosecutors charged Jeffrey with capital murder. Capital murder means murder that can be punished by death. The prosecutors presented the physical evidence, the knife, the hammer, the blood, the autopsies. They presented the testimony of Henry Caldwell III, who found the bodies. They presented the jailhouse friend who heard Jeffrey confess. They showed that Jeffrey had lied in his statements. The jury found Jeffrey Caldwell guilty of capital murder for killing his mother, his father, and his sister. The trial then moved to the punishment phase. The jury had to decide between life in prison and the death penalty. During the punishment phase, the prosecutors showed Jeffrey's criminal history. He had been convicted of burglary in 1983 and robbery in 1986. He was on parole when he committed the murders. His parole officer testified that Jeffrey broke his parole rules many times. Lewis Gibson, a high school friend, testified that Jeffrey carried a gun and sold drugs. Gibson also said that on the morning he was supposed to testify, Jeffrey came to his jail cell without permission and beat him up. Jeffrey told Gibson, "I teach you about testifying." This showed that Jeffrey was violent and dangerous even while in custody. Jeffrey's own brothers, including Henry Caldwell III, testified against him. They told the jury that they believed Jeffrey would continue to be a threat to society if he was ever released. They said this even though they did not want their brother to die. They wanted justice for their parents and sister. On October 16, 1991, the jury sentenced Jeffrey Caldwell to death by lethal injection. The judge approved the sentence. Jeffrey was sent to death row in Texas. Jeffrey appealed his case many times. He asked higher courts to review his conviction. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the conviction and death sentence in 1991. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear his case in 1992. He filed a state habeas corpus petition, which was denied in 1994. He filed a federal habeas corpus petition in 1995. A federal district court denied relief in 1999. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals also denied relief in 2000. All of these appeals failed. The courts found no reason to overturn his conviction or his death sentence. In the years on death row, Jeffrey changed his story again. He said Jamaican mobsters killed his family. He said he had stolen drugs from them. He said the mobsters came to the house looking for him. He said when they did not find him, they killed his parents and sister. He said his criminal past was the only reason he was arrested. He said he was innocent. But he also admitted in a written statement before his execution that the deaths were his fault because he robbed drug dealers. He still denied holding the knife or the hammer. On August 30th, 2000, Jeffrey Henry Caldwell was executed by lethal injection at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. He was 37 years old. His last written statement said he still screamed out that he did not kill them. He said he accepted the blame for what happened, but did not commit the murders. He expressed love for his family and his daughter. He told his brothers he could forgive them. The execution began at 6:17 p.m. He coughed, gasped, made a snoring sound, and was pronounced dead at 6:25 p.m. Henry Caldwell III did not attend the execution. He had told a reporter earlier that week that he did not want his brother to die, but that Jeffrey committed a wrong and had to face judgment. The 3 victims were buried in Dallas. Jeffrey's daughter grew up without her father. The case ended with Jeffrey's death, and the Caldwell family lost 4 members: a father, a mother, a daughter, and a son. Story 3. Russell William Burkett was born on January 5, 1968. He was a white male. He grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. His parents were Lester Burkett Sr. and his mother. He had a brother named Lester Burkett Jr. Russell did not do well in school. He never graduated from high school. He had trouble with reading, writing, and math. Later, doctors would say he had a severe form of dyslexia. Dyslexia made it hard for him to read and understand written words. He also had a condition called dysthymia, that is a form of mild to long-term depression. It made him feel sad or low for many years. Because he could not read or write well, Russell relied on other people to read things for him. He used his father and his lawyers to explain papers and legal documents. He could not read books for fun. Instead, he looked at magazines about hunting and trucks. Russell tried to kill himself 2 times when he was younger. He had a history of mental problems. These problems started when he was about 7 years old. He saw monsters in his cell at times. He also had psychotic episodes, which means he lost touch with reality sometimes. Even with his learning and mental problems, Russell had skills. He was good at fixing cars. He knew how to do automotive repairs. He held several jobs. He worked as a construction worker. He also worked as a bagger at a grocery store. He had no prior criminal record before the events that would later happen. He had never been arrested or charged with any crime before. Russell lived next door to a family named Tefelsky. The Tefelsky home was in a neighborhood called Lake Placid in Virginia Beach. The area was near the Oceana Naval Air Station. Russell's parents also lived in the same area. The Burkett family had several large dogs in their backyard. These dogs would often look over the privacy fence that surrounded the Burkett property. Russell would sometimes go into the Tefelsky home to do small repair jobs. He did these jobs when the husband of the house was away. The husband's name was Andy Tefelsky. Andy was a Navy SEAL. His job required him to leave home for missions. When he was gone, Russell helped the family with odd tasks around the house. By January 1993, Russell was 25 years old. He lived next to Catherine Tefelsky, her daughter Ashley, who was 5 years old, her son Andrew, who was 3 years old, and sometimes other children who stayed over. Russell had no wife or children of his own. He spent much of his time at home or doing basic jobs. His mental health continued to be a struggle, but he had not taken medication for some periods. He believed he was not crazy, even though doctors had diagnosed him with mental conditions. On the night of January 13, 1993, Russell was outside his residence around midnight. He lived right next door to the Tefelskys. He did not see anything unusual that night. He went back inside his home. On the morning of January 14, 1993, Russell Burkett went from his home to the house next door. The house belonged to his neighbor, Catherine Tefelsky. Her husband Andy was a Navy SEAL and was away on a mission. Catherine was home with her 5-year-old daughter Ashley, her 3-year-old son Andrew, and a 3-year-old girl named Chelsea Brothers. Chelsea had spent the night at the Tefelsky home. Russell entered the Tefelsky home through a door at the back of the house. He used a tool to force that door open. The door had fresh tool marks on it after he entered. The tool he used to break in was an old rusty crowbar. The crowbar was about 30 inches long. It had a screwdriver tip on one end. It was an automotive tool, meaning it was used for car repairs. The crowbar was rusty. Once inside, Russell moved through the house. He found Catherine Tefelsky in her bed. She was wearing a white sweatshirt. Russell began to beat her with the crowbar. He struck her head 6 or 7 times. The crowbar was heavy. Each blow crushed part of her skull. The force was massive. Her skull was completely crushed. While she was lying in bed, still alive or dying, Russell used the same crowbar to sexually assault her. He inserted the tool into her vagina. The tool went in about 21 inches. It tore through her vaginal wall, her artery, her muscle, her bowel, her stomach, and her diaphragm. He also inserted the tool into her anus. A gray, greasy substance was found at the opening of her anus. The blunt force to her head alone would have been enough to kill her. The injuries from the crowbar inside her body would also have been enough to kill her. After attacking Catherine, Russell went to the bedroom of Ashley Tefelsky. Ashley was 5 years old. She was lying in her bed. Russell beat her in the head with the same rusty crowbar. He struck her head 4 or 5 times. Two of the wounds left a pattern on her skin from the crowbar's surface. One wound did not break the skin but crushed the skull underneath. Another wound showed tool marks that matched the marks on the back door where he had broken in. Ashley died from blunt force trauma to her head. Her body was found with her hand hanging over the side of the bed and a pool of blood beneath her. Russell then went to the bedroom of Andrew Tefelsky Jr., who was 3 years old. Andrew was lying in the top bunk of a bunk bed. Russell threw Andrew against a fireplace or struck him with force. Andrew suffered a double break in his jaw. The break happened at the joint and at the tip of the jaw. He also had a wound above one of his eyes. The third child in the house was Chelsea Brothers. She was also 3 years old. She had been spending the night at the Tefelsky home. Russell hurt Chelsea as well. She suffered bruises to her head, her face, and her body. Chelsea saw the bad man. Later, she would tell an officer that the bad man had a gun and a dog. She said she was afraid of the dog, a big dog that was on the roof of a house. During the attack, Russell used a blue washcloth. He left the washcloth in the room near Catherine Tefelsky's body. On that washcloth, there were traces of spermatozoa, which are male reproductive cells. That meant Russell had ejaculated onto the washcloth. After finishing the attacks, Russell left the Tefelsky home. He went back to his own home next door. He did not clean up or hide the crowbar. He left the crowbar somewhere. He also left the blue washcloth at the scene. Before leaving, he took an old double-barreled shotgun from the Tefelsky residence. He carried it out of the house and threw it into the woods behind the home. Children were left alive in the house. Andrew Tefelsky Jr. was still conscious. Chelsea Brothers was crying. Hours passed. Catherine Tefelsky had agreed to take Chelsea to school that morning, but she never did. Around 2 p.m., a woman named Terry Kane called Catherine's mother, Barbara Pullman. Kane said Chelsea had spent the night at the Tefelsky home, but had not been taken to school. Pullman tried to call her daughter's house. The answering machine picked up, which was not normal. Pullman decided to go to the house. When Pullman arrived, the front door was locked. A neighbor named Joan Poylan helped her. They heard Chelsea crying inside. Chelsea could not open the front door because she was too small. Pullman and Poylan went to the back of the house. The back door was open. They entered. Chelsea ran to them crying. She had a facial injury. They searched the house and found Catherine's partially nude body covered in blood on her bed. Her white sweatshirt was ripped and soaked with blood. They found Ashley's body in her bed with blood beneath her. They found Andrew in his top bunk bed with injuries to his head and face. He was still conscious. Pullman called the police from the kitchen. After Barbara Pullman called the police, officers arrived at the Tefelsky home. They saw the bodies of Catherine and Ashley. They saw the injured children, Andrew and Chelsea. The police secured the area and began looking for evidence. Detective Sean Hoffman and another officer searched outside the house. They brought a trained dog to track scents. The dog found a track that went from the back utility room of the house into a wooded area behind the home. In those woods, an officer found an old double-barreled shotgun. Police later confirmed that the shotgun had been taken from the Tefelsky residence. Forensic scientists examined the house. They found a blue washcloth in the room near Catherine's body. A scientist named Lynn S. Baird examined the washcloth. She found spermatozoa on it. Another scientist, Robert W. Scanlon, performed DNA tests on the spermatozoa. He determined that the DNA matched Russell Burkett's DNA profile. Only about 7.8% of the white male population shared that same DNA type. That meant Burkett could not be ruled out as the source. Police also noticed a man looking at them from the house next door. That man was Russell Burkett. He looked at the officers for several minutes before going back inside. This happened multiple times. At one point, Burkett started walking toward 2 police officers. They told him to return to his home. That same day, Detective K.P. Rexroad spoke with Burkett inside his home. Burkett told the detective that he often went into Mrs. Tefelsky's home to do small jobs when her husband was away. He also said he had been outside his house around midnight on January 13th, but he had not seen anything unusual. The detective noted this information. For 6 days, police did not make an arrest. The neighborhood was scared. People wondered who had killed the mother and child. On January 20th, 1993, police arrested Russell Burkett. They questioned him for 5 hours. During questioning, Burkett said, "I'm going to need a lawyer." Despite this, he later confessed to the crimes. He told police, "Maybe I flipped out and didn't know what I was doing." He could not explain why he did it. He admitted he committed the murders. After his confession, Burkett was charged. In 1994, he pleaded guilty to all charges. He pleaded guilty to capital murder for killing Catherine and Ashley as part of the same act. He also pleaded guilty to sexual penetration with an inanimate object, malicious wounding of Andrew Tefelsky Jr., malicious wounding of Chelsea Brothers, and statutory burglary. Before accepting his guilty pleas, the trial court questioned Burkett. The judge determined that Burkett was making his pleas voluntarily, intelligently, and knowingly. The trial court held a separate hearing to decide the punishment. The Commonwealth, which is the state of Virginia, presented its case. Burkett's lawyers tried to show he had mental problems. 2 clinical psychologists testified for Burkett, Dr. Thomas Ryan and Dr. Gary Hawk. Dr. Ryan said Burkett had low average to average intelligence and could not perform well in reading, writing, and math. Dr. Hawk said Burkett had severe dyslexia and dysthymia, a form of long-term depression. The state psychiatrist, Dr. Paul Mansheim, testified that Burkett's mental condition did not affect the case. The judge found Dr. Mansheim more believable than Burkett's experts. The judge agreed that the only factor in Burkett's favor was that he had no prior criminal record. The judge sentenced Burkett to death for the capital murder of Catherine and Ashley. The judge found both vileness and future dangerousness as reasons for the death sentence. For the other crimes, Burkett received life in prison for the burglary, life in prison for the sexual assault, and 20 years for each of the 2 malicious wounding charges. When the judge announced the death sentence, Burkett smiled. He clapped his hands. He said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you." Burkett appealed his case. He argued that his confession was taken illegally because he had asked for a lawyer. He also argued that Dr. Mansheim had lied about reading certain documents before interviewing him. The Virginia Supreme Court reviewed the case. In 1994, the court upheld his conviction and sentence. The court found that the confession was valid and that the judge was correct to believe Dr. Mansheim. Burkett then asked the U.S. Supreme Court to hear his case. In 1995, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear it. While on death row, Burkett wanted to die. He asked to drop his appeals. He wrote letters to a federal judge begging to be executed. He said appeals were pointless. He said, "I'm not afraid to die. I never was." His own lawyers blocked his request. They said he was not competent to make that decision because of his mental problems. A federal judge ordered a psychiatrist to examine Burkett, but Burkett refused to cooperate. Because of this, the legal appeals continued even though Burkett did not want them. In June 2000, Burkett was scheduled to be executed. He chose the electric chair instead of lethal injection. He said it was his way of ending a life he hasn't wanted. But 75 minutes before he was to die, the U.S. Supreme Court granted a stay of execution. The court stopped the execution so they could consider his appeal. The court later refused to hear the appeal, so the execution was rescheduled. Burkett's lawyer, Anthony A. Protogyra, asked Governor Jim Gilmore for clemency. The lawyer said Burkett was mentally disabled and was not thinking correctly when he pleaded guilty. The lawyer also asked for new DNA testing on the blue washcloth. The lawyer pointed out that Burkett's brother, Lester Burkett Jr., had also been questioned by police. The DNA matched about 8% of white men, including both Russell and his brother. Governor Gilmore denied the clemency request. He said further DNA testing was not needed because Russell Burkett had always admitted his guilt and said no one else was involved. On August 30th, 2000, Russell William Burkett was executed at the Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. The method used was lethal injection. Before he died, a minister named Reverend Bobby West said Burkett was in a good frame of mind and had repented all his sins. When asked if he had a final statement, Burkett shook his head and said nothing. He was pronounced dead at 9:07 p.m. He was 32 years old. The victim's family lived with the loss. Catherine Tefelsky's husband, Andy, was a Navy SEAL who had been away on a mission when his wife and daughter were killed. Andrew Tefelsky Jr., who survived with a broken jaw, and Chelsea Brothers, who survived with bruises, grew up without Catherine and Ashley. The case closed when Russell Burkett was executed, but the harm he caused never went away for those who knew the Tefelsky family. That was the end of Russell William Burkett's life and the end of the case. Story 4. George Bernard Harris was born on February 9, 1959 in Newport, Arkansas. Newport is a small town in the eastern part of the state. His family gave him the nickname Baby when he was young. That name stayed with him as he grew older. When George was still a child, his family moved from Arkansas to Kansas City, Missouri. They moved because they hoped to find better jobs and a better life. Kansas City became his home. He grew up in the city's neighborhoods. There is little public information about his parents, his brothers or sisters, or his schooling. What is known is that he spent his teenage years in Kansas City. On February 26, 1976, George Harris was 17 years old. On that day, he was arrested in Kansas City for a crime called robbery in the first degree. Robbery means taking something from someone by force or by making them afraid. This was his first known arrest. The arrest happened just 17 days after his 17th birthday. Because he was arrested for a serious crime, the court processed his case. In September of the same year, 1976, a judge sentenced George Harris to 8 years in prison. He was sent to the Missouri Department of Corrections. That is the state prison system. He was 18 years old when he entered prison. Harris served his time. The exact date he was released is not clearly recorded in public documents, but the records show that by the early 1980s he was no longer in prison. He returned to living in Missouri. He had a criminal record from his youth. He had spent years behind bars. After his release, he went back to the same areas and the same circles of people he knew before. His life after prison was not fully documented. There are no clear records of a regular job, a long-term relationship, or a home address that he kept for many years. Instead, he moved around. He stayed in contact with people who also had criminal histories. He became known by his nickname, Baby, on the streets of Kansas City. People who knew him said he could be quick to anger. But before March 1989, he had not been convicted of any violent crime. His only conviction was for robbery, which is a property crime that involves force or threat. By early 1989, George Harris was 30 years old. He had spent about 8 years of his life in prison as a young man. He was now free. He spent his days in Kansas City. He was known to gamble. One of his habits was playing a dice game called craps. He played for money. He also had access to guns, though he did not own them legally. The people he spent time with were often involved in drugs, gambling, and stolen goods. His reputation on the street was mixed. Some people thought he was tough. Others thought he was unpredictable. On the morning of March 11, 1989, Harris was in Kansas City. He was playing craps. That morning, he won some money. People noticed that he had cash in his pocket. That led to a series of events that would change his life forever. On the morning of March 11th, 1989, George Harris won money playing craps. Craps is a dice game where players bet on the outcome of rolls. Harris won enough that other people noticed he had extra cash. A man who needed money came to Harris. This man asked Harris to let him pawn 2 machine guns. Pawning means giving something valuable in exchange for money, with the promise to repay later. The 2 machine guns were an Uzi and a .45 caliber Thompson automatic machine gun. Harris agreed. He gave the man $500. In return, Harris took possession of the 2 machine guns. He put them in the trunk of his car. Harris walked back toward the place where the craps game was happening. He started to worry. He thought someone might break into his car and steal the machine guns. So he looked for a friend who could keep the guns safe for a short time. He saw a man named Michael Taylor. Harris asked Taylor if he would hold on to the machine guns for him. Taylor said yes. Harris then followed Taylor to Taylor's house. Several other men came along as well. One of them was Stanley Hank Willoughby. When Harris arrived at the house, Taylor asked Willoughby to go down to Harris's car. Harris spoke to Willoughby. He opened the trunk. He took out a box that held the 2 machine guns. He handed the box to Willoughby. Willoughby walked toward the house with the box. A man named Rodney Butler was sitting on the porch. Butler asked Willoughby not to bring the guns inside the house. So Willoughby handed the box to 2 young boys. These boys were Michael Taylor's younger brothers. Their names were Cortez Taylor and Anthony Taylor. Willoughby told the boys to hide the guns somewhere near the house. The boys took the box. They hid it under some bushes in the backyard. Then the boys left the area. They did not tell Willoughby where they had hidden the guns. Harris left the house. Later that evening, around 8 p.m., Harris came back to the house. He was looking for Michael Taylor. Someone else answered the door. That person said Taylor was upstairs sleeping. Harris went upstairs. He woke Taylor or found him in bed. Harris told Taylor he had come to pick up the guns. Taylor said he did not know where the guns were. Harris insisted he needed the guns right away. Earlier that day, someone had called Harris a punk. A punk means a weak or cowardly person. Harris was angry about this insult. He told Taylor he was going to do a drive-by shooting. That means shooting from a car at people on the street or at a building. He said he would do this to show them that he was not a punk. Taylor told Harris to ask Willoughby about the machine guns. Willoughby was not at the house at that moment. He had gone out to pick up some girls. Harris went downstairs. Taylor stayed in bed. Sometime later, Harris yelled for Michael Taylor to come downstairs. Taylor came down. He saw Harris, Willoughby, and several other people in the living room area. Those other people were Ross Tillefero, Delmar Hatcher, Deanna Jacobs, a woman named Ingrid, and Jarlath Potts. Harris asked Taylor for his guns again. Taylor again said to ask Willoughby. Willoughby explained that he did not know where the guns were. He said the 2 young Taylor brothers had hidden them, and the boys had left without telling him where. Harris said he wanted his guns now. Willoughby went outside to look for the guns. While he was outside, Harris was heard to say, "I'm going to kill that nigger." That meant he intended to kill Willoughby. 4 of the other people in the house went upstairs. They left the living room. Willoughby came back after about 5 minutes. He did not have the guns. Then Rodney Butler left to look for the guns. Now only 3 people remained in the living room: Michael Taylor, George Harris, and Hank Willoughby. Willoughby told Harris that if he wanted his guns, he would have to wait until Cortez and Anthony Taylor came back. Harris said he wanted his guns right away. Willoughby then said, "Well, I can't help you." Harris got up from the chair where he was sitting. He pulled a .41 caliber Ruger Blackhawk Magnum revolver from his waistband. The waistband is the part of his pants around his waist. He pointed the gun at Willoughby. He fired 1 shot. The bullet hit Willoughby in the lower part of his face and neck. The bullet passed through Willoughby's carotid artery. The carotid artery is a large blood vessel in the neck that carries blood to the brain. Damage to this artery causes very fast blood loss. Willoughby did not fall dead immediately. He staggered next door to Michael Taylor's house. He collapsed on the steps. A few minutes later, someone called the police and an ambulance. Meanwhile, Rodney Butler returned with the machine guns. He had found them. He placed the box containing the guns on the porch. Then he ran inside. Harris picked up the box. He took the guns. He got into his car and drove away. Willoughby died before the ambulance could get him to a hospital. The time of death was recorded as March 11th, 1989. Harris did not stop. He drove to an apartment belonging to a woman named Sabrina Lowe. He went inside. Then he and Lowe left together. They went to a place called the Champagne Lounge. Harris was looking for a man named Rudy. He told Lowe that he intended to kill Rudy. He said he had bought the machine guns for that purpose. He did not find Rudy at the lounge that night. 4 days later, on March 15, 1989, Harris was still in Missouri. He was in a city called Columbia. Columbia is about 120 miles east of Kansas City. On that day, Harris and other people committed an armed robbery. Armed robbery means taking property from a person or business while using a weapon or threatening to use one. The robbery happened at a grocery store in Columbia. Harris took part in it. He carried a weapon. The exact details of that robbery are not fully described in public court records for this case, but the fact of the robbery is recorded. This robbery was a separate crime from the shooting of Willoughby. Harris was not arrested at the scene of the robbery. The police did not catch him that day. He left the store and went somewhere else. At this point, Harris had killed Stanley Willoughby. He had fled Kansas City. He had committed an armed robbery in Columbia. He was still free. No one had arrested him yet. But people knew what had happened. The police had started asking questions. Witnesses had given names. The investigation was about to begin. On the night of March 11th, 1989, after Stanley Willoughby was shot, someone in the house called for help. The police and an ambulance arrived at Michael Taylor's house in Kansas City. They found Willoughby collapsed on the steps next door. He was already dead or dying. The police began asking questions immediately. They talked to the people who were still at the house. Those people included Michael Taylor, Rodney Butler, and others who had been in the living room or upstairs. The witnesses gave statements. They told the police that George Bernard Harris had shot Willoughby. They described the argument about the machine guns. They said Harris pulled a revolver from his waistband and fired one shot. They also said Harris took the machine guns and drove away. The police now had a name and a description of the shooter. They also knew the kind of car Harris was driving. The police did not find Harris that night. He had already left Kansas City. They started a search for him. They also looked for the machine guns, because possessing those weapons was a crime under federal law. But the guns had disappeared with Harris. 4 days later, on March 15, 1989, Harris was in Columbia, Missouri. That day, he and several other people robbed a grocery store. They used weapons during the robbery. The police in Columbia responded to the scene. They caught Harris shortly after that robbery. The exact details of how they caught him are not fully recorded in public documents for the murder case. But the record shows that law enforcement arrested Harris in Columbia on March 15, 1989, because of his involvement in that armed robbery. Once Harris was in custody in Columbia, the Kansas City police learned about his arrest. They connected him to the murder of Stanley Willoughby. They transferred him or questioned him about the shooting. On March 22, 1989, a grand jury in Jackson County, Missouri formally indicted Harris. An indictment is a formal charge that a person has committed a crime. He was charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 1 count of armed criminal action. Armed criminal action means using a weapon while committing a felony. While Harris was in jail waiting for the murder trial, he faced another legal proceeding. On April 26, 1989, he was arrested again in Colombia for the grocery store robbery. The charge was robbery in the first degree and armed criminal action. On October 2nd, 1989, a judge sentenced Harris for that robbery. He received 12 years in prison for the robbery and 3 years for the armed criminal action. These sentences were set to run at the same time as each other. He was already in custody, so he served that time while waiting for the murder trial. The murder trial began on February 5th, 1990, in the Jackson County Circuit Court. The prosecutor presented evidence. The main witness was Michael Taylor. Taylor said Harris shot Willoughby without provocation. Harris testified in his own defense. He admitted shooting Willoughby, but he said he acted in self-defense. He claimed Willoughby reached for his own gun during the argument. Harris said he jumped up and fired one shot because he was afraid for his life. The jury heard both versions. They also heard that Harris had a prior conviction for robbery from 1976. The jury did not hear from a man named Ben Brown. Ben Brown was in the house that night and saw the shooting. Harris's defense lawyer did not contact Brown or call him to testify. Later, Brown stated that Willoughby appeared to be reaching for a gun when Harris shot him. That evidence was not presented at trial. The jury deliberated. On February 10, 1990, they found George Harris guilty of murder in the first degree. The same jury then heard evidence about whether Harris should receive the death penalty or life in prison. 2 days later, on February 12, 1990, the jury returned a sentence of death. The judge formally sentenced Harris to death on July 30, 1990. After the sentence, Harris tried to challenge his conviction and death sentence. On December 5, 1990, he filed a motion for post-conviction relief. A motion for post-conviction relief is a request to the court to overturn the conviction or sentence because of legal errors. The Jackson County Circuit Court denied that motion on January 15, 1992. Harris appealed to the Missouri State Supreme Court. On February 22, 1992, the Missouri Supreme Court affirmed the denial. That means they agreed with the lower court and kept the conviction and death sentence in place. Harris then filed a direct appeal to the Missouri Supreme Court about the original trial. The court reviewed the case. On January 25, 1994, the Missouri Supreme Court issued a decision in State v. Harris, 870S.W.2D798. They affirmed the conviction and death sentence. That meant they found no legal errors serious enough to change the outcome. Harris then asked the United States Supreme Court to review his case. On October 17, 1994, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed the judgment. They kept the conviction and death sentence. On October 28, 1994, Harris filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the United States District Court for the Western District of Missouri. A habeas corpus petition is a request to a federal court to review whether a person is being held in prison illegally. He argued that his lawyer had been inadequate and that the evidence did not support first-degree murder. On November 11, 1996, the federal district court denied his petition. He appealed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. On July 13, 1999, the Eighth Circuit denied his petition. The court issued a full opinion in Harris v. Bowersox, 184 F.3d 744. Harris asked the Eighth Circuit to rehear the case. On August 31, 1999, the court denied his motion for rehearing. He then asked the U.S. Supreme Court to review his habeas petition. On January 10, 2000, the Supreme Court declined to review the case. That meant no more appeals were available in federal court. On February 14, 2000, Harris asked the Eighth Circuit to recall the mandate. Recalling the mandate would have reopened the case. The court denied this motion. On March 23, 2000, the Federal District Court denied Harris's motion for relief from judgment. He appealed that denial. On May 9, 2000, the Eighth Circuit denied his motion for rehearing. With all legal options exhausted, the Missouri Supreme Court issued an order and warrant of execution on August 14, 2000. The warrant set September 13, 2000, as the date of execution. The execution was scheduled to take place at the Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri. The method was lethal injection. On September 13, 2000, George Bernard Harris, age 41, was executed by lethal injection in Missouri. He was the 665th murderer executed in the United States since 1976, the 67th murderer executed in the U.S. in the year 2000, the 4th murderer executed in Missouri in 2000, and the 45th murderer executed in Missouri since 1976. Stanley Hank Willoughby died on March 11, 1989 from a single gunshot wound. His killer was put to death 11 years, 6 months, and 2 days later. That was the final end of the case. Story 5. Derek Rocco Barnabé was born in 1967. His exact birth date is not listed in the public records of his case. He was born in the United States. His parents were Jane Barnabé and Serafino Barnabé. The family lived in a town in New Jersey. Derek grew up in a loving family. His parents cared for him. He had a brother named Craig. Another brother was a graduate of West Point, which is a military academy. Derek also had an uncle who survived the Bataan Death March during World War II. A cousin held the Silver Star, which is a medal for bravery in war. As a child, Derek showed intelligence. He wrote poetry at a young age. When he was 5 years old, he wrote a poem called The Sea. The poem said, "I am the sea, so bold and strong / I laugh and play all day long / nothing can worry me / because I am completely free." He also wrote a poem about his father called Big Dad. That poem said, "Big Dad's the greatest / he never turns you down." At age 8, Derek earned a green belt in Tang Soo Do, which is a type of karate. When he was 10 years old, he played soccer and basketball. He won awards in both sports. Derek did well in school. At age 12, he won the Fire Prevention Award. He also completed a boatman's safety course. His school put him on the high honor roll year after year. He received citations for essays with titles like Why I Think America is Great and Mental Gymnastics Too. When Derek was 13, he wrote to Congressman William J. Hughes. Derek asked questions about college costs. The congressman wrote back. The letter said that Congressman Hughes understood Derek's fears about paying for college. Derek wanted to become a doctor at that time. At age 17, Derek entered a contest called Voice of Democracy. He wrote a speech about patriotism. He placed first at the local level and first at the district level. The Veterans of Foreign Wars gave him an award. His father told a newspaper that Derek was more than qualified to write about patriotism. Derek's essay was published in the Press of Atlantic City. Derek also won the Rotary Club Award. That award went to the junior high school graduate with the highest grades. After high school, Derek went to college. He attended for 1.5 years. He did not finish college. He stopped going before earning a degree. Later, Derek moved to Norfolk, Virginia. He shared a house with other young men. He started dating a young woman. That woman was a student at Old Dominion University. Derek Barnabé was dating a 17-year-old girl named Sarah Wisnowski. Sarah was a freshman at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. She had come from Lynchburg, Virginia, to attend college. On September 22, 1993, Sarah went to the house where Derek lived. He shared the house with several other young men. Sarah was last seen alive in Derek's room inside that house. At some point while Sarah was in Derek's room, he forced her to have sex. She did not agree to this. The sex was not voluntary. After the rape, Derek attacked her with his hands. He strangled her. She could not breathe. While she was still alive, or just after, Derek picked up a tool. That tool was a ball-peen hammer. It is a small metal hammer with a rounded end. He hit Sarah on the head 10 times with that hammer. Each blow caused damage to her skull. After Sarah was dead, Derek removed her clothes. Her body was naked. He took her body to the Lafayette River, which was near his house. He put her body into the water. Then he left the area. Later that day, someone found Sarah's body floating in the river. She was nude. An autopsy was performed later. The medical examiner found that she had been strangled. She had 10 separate blows to her head from a blunt object shaped like a ball-peen hammer. The examiner also found evidence of forced sexual intercourse. Derek did not stay in Norfolk. He left the city in the hours before Sarah's body was found. He drove away from Virginia and went to the state of Ohio. Once he arrived in Ohio, he stopped using his real name. He began living under a fake name so that people would not know who he was. Back in the house where Derek had lived, the police later searched his room. They found stains on the bed. They found stains on the walls and on the carpet. These stains matched Sarah's blood type. They also found blood on a surfboard that was in another room of the house. In Derek's room, investigators found evidence that semen was present. That semen came from Derek. No other person's semen was found in Sarah's body. Derek did not have any witnesses to the crime. No one saw him kill Sarah. The murder weapon, the ball-peen hammer, was never found. The police looked for it, but could not locate it. At the time of the crime, some people who knew Derek and Sarah noticed that something was wrong. Sarah had been seen going to Derek's house. After that, she was not seen again. But no one called the police immediately. No one took action at that moment. The police in Norfolk, Virginia, began their investigation after Sarah Wisniewski's body was found in the Lafayette River. A detective named Sean Squires was the senior homicide investigator assigned to the case. He and his team started looking for evidence. The police searched the house where Derek Barnaby had lived. In Derek's bedroom, they found bloodstains on the bed, the walls, and the carpet. They sent these stains to a lab for testing. The tests showed that the blood matched Sarah's blood type. They also found semen in Sarah's body during the autopsy. DNA tests were performed on that semen. The DNA matched Derek Barnaby. The tests also showed that no other person's semen was present in Sarah's body. The police learned that Derek had left Norfolk in the hours before Sarah's body was found. They discovered that he had gone to Ohio and was living there under a fake name. Police officers traveled to Ohio and arrested him. He was brought back to Virginia to face charges. In 1995, Derek went to trial. The trial lasted 11 days. The prosecutors presented the DNA evidence showing that Derek's semen was inside Sarah. They presented the blood evidence from Derek's room. They told the jury that Derek had fled to Ohio and used a false name. Derek denied the charges. He said that he and Sarah had a consensual relationship, but the autopsy showed that the sexual intercourse was by force. The jury found Derek guilty of capital murder and rape. The same jury then heard additional evidence about why Derek should live or die. They decided on a sentence of death. The judge agreed with that sentence. After the trial, Derek's lawyers filed many appeals. They asked higher courts to look at the case. All of the appeals were denied. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit ruled that the evidence was very strong. They said the evidence left no real uncertainty that Derek had raped and killed Sarah. Years later, as the execution date came close, Derek's lawyers made a new request. They asked Governor Jim Gilmore to order more DNA tests on fingernail clippings taken from Sarah's hands. The lawyers believed that Sarah might have scratched her attacker while she was being choked. They hoped that the fingernails would contain DNA from someone else, which would prove Derek was innocent. The governor agreed to the testing. A judge in Norfolk Circuit Court signed an order. The evidence envelopes containing Sarah's fingernails were delivered to the Virginia Division of Forensic Science. The director of that division was Dr. Paul Ferrara. He examined the envelopes. They were sealed. The seals had the initials of the examiner who had originally collected the fingernails. The seals were unbroken. The evidence had not been tampered with. Dr. Ferrara performed the DNA tests on the fingernail clippings. He found that the fingernails contained Sarah's own DNA and the DNA of one other person. That other person's DNA profile was run through the state's DNA database. The database found one match. That match was Derek Rocco Barnabé. The governor received the test results on September 11th, 2000. He issued a statement. He said the DNA tests confirmed that Derek was guilty. He said the results proved the jury's verdict was correct. On September 14th, 2000, Derek Rocco Barnabé was executed by lethal injection at the Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia. He was 33 years old. His final statement said he was innocent. After he was dead, the case was closed. Sarah Wisnowski's family received no closure beyond the execution. Derek's body was not cremated, as his mother asked him not to do so. The murder weapon was never found, and no other person was ever charged. The story ends with Derek Barnabé pronounced dead at 9:05 p.m. on September 14th, 2000. Story 6. Ricky Nolan McGinn was born on March 11, 1957. He was a white male. He grew up in Texas, though not much is known to the public about his early childhood or his parents. He went to school like most children in his area. He did not finish a college degree. As a young man, he worked different jobs to earn money. He did not have a long, steady career. He spent time around cars and trucks, and he liked to fish and drink beer. When Ricky became an adult, he started having relationships with women. He was not a stable person. His behavior toward women and girls was often aggressive and sexual. People around him did not always know about this side of him at first. In April 1985, Ricky McGinn met a young woman named Sonia Vaughn. She was a student at Abilene Christian University. She was in her second year of college. Ricky wanted to have sex with her. Sonia refused. Instead of accepting her refusal, Ricky became angry and assaulted her. This was the first known time that he forced himself on a woman who said no. About 1 year later, in August 1986, Ricky threatened a woman named Pamela Adams. He used a knife to scare her. He forced her to do sexual acts with him. Pamela was afraid for her life, so she did what he said. After this attack, Ricky was not arrested right away. The police did not know about these incidents at the time, or the women did not report them immediately. In 1987, Ricky McGinn had a daughter. Her name was Latasha McGinn. Latasha's mother was a woman named Imogene Bible. Ricky was the father. Latasha was a small child, only 3 or 4 years old. That same year, Ricky sexually assaulted his own daughter. He touched her in ways that were wrong and illegal. After he did this, he threatened Latasha. He told her that if she told anyone, he would kill her and kill her mother too. Latasha was very young. She was scared. She did not tell anyone at that time. A few years after this, Imogene Bible tried to protect her daughter. She did not want Ricky to be alone with Latasha anymore. When Imogene told Ricky this, he became very angry. He threatened to beat Imogene to death. She believed he could do it, so she was afraid. But still, no one called the police to report these threats or the sexual assault on the child. Ricky continued to live his life without being caught or punished for these acts. He moved from place to place. He did not keep a steady job. He drank beer often. He spent time fishing and working on old vehicles. He married a woman named Janet McGinn at some point. Janet already had a daughter from a previous relationship. The daughter's name was Stephanie Ray Flannery. Stephanie was born on a date not listed in public records, but by 1993 she was 12 years old. Ricky became Stephanie's stepfather. The family lived in a house in Brownwood, Texas. Brownwood is a small city in central Texas. By early 1993, Ricky McGinn was living in that house with Janet and Stephanie. Janet did not know about the things Ricky had done to other women and to his own daughter. Ricky did not tell her. He acted like a normal husband and stepfather most of the time, but he had dark secrets from his past. He had hurt women and children before. He had used threats and knives. He had forced sex on people who said no. And no police officer had ever arrested him for any of those acts. On the morning of May 22, 1993, Janet McGinn left her home in Brownwood, Texas. She was going to Arlington for a trip. She left her 12-year-old daughter, Stephanie Ray Flannery, at home with Ricky McGinn. Ricky was Janet's husband and Stephanie's stepfather. This meant Ricky and Stephanie were alone together for the whole day. Janet trusted Ricky to take care of her daughter. That day, Ricky spent time with Stephanie. Later, he told police that they drank beer together. He said they fished and drank enough beer that Stephanie became sick. He said she fell asleep after drinking. Then Ricky said Stephanie woke up, went for a walk, and never came back. He said he looked for her late that afternoon. He told a friend that Stephanie was missing. But he did not call the police right away. He waited until 9:30 at night to call and report her missing. What Ricky did not tell the police was what really happened. While they were alone, Ricky sexually assaulted Stephanie. He forced her to have sex with him. After that, he picked up an axe. He hit Stephanie in the head with the blunt side of the axe. He hit her more than once. She suffered multiple head injuries. Her skull was fractured. She died from these injuries. After Stephanie was dead, Ricky had to hide her body. He took her body away from the house. He drove to a farm-to-market road near his home in Brown County. He put Stephanie's body inside a culvert. A culvert is a pipe or tunnel that allows water to flow under a road. He left her there. 3 days passed before anyone found Stephanie. Her body was discovered in that culvert along the road. While Stephanie was missing, the police started looking for her. They used trained search dogs. The next day after she was reported missing, the police searched Ricky's car. They found many blood splatters inside the car. Ricky said the blood came from fish he had caught, but the police tested the blood. The tests showed the blood was human blood. The blood type matched Stephanie's blood type. The police also found blood on the clothes Ricky had been wearing. That blood also matched Stephanie's blood type. The police later found a bloody axe. It was under the seat of a pickup truck on Ricky's property. The axe was the weapon used to hit Stephanie in the head. Ricky had committed 2 crimes against Stephanie. First, he raped her. Second, he murdered her by beating her head with an axe. Then he tried to hide what he did by lying about the blood in his car and by hiding her body in a culvert. The police did not arrest him immediately. They were still gathering evidence. But they had already found blood in his car, blood on his clothes, and a bloody axe on his property. They also had his story about fishing and drinking, which did not match the evidence they were finding. 3 days after Stephanie was killed, her body was found. A person driving along the farm-to-market road saw her in the culvert. That person called the police. Officers arrived and confirmed the body was Stephanie Flannery. She had died from multiple head injuries and a fractured skull. The police already had Ricky McGinn as a suspect. They had found blood in his car and on his clothes. They had found the bloody axe under the seat of a truck on his property. Now that the body was found, the investigation moved forward. The police sent the blood and hair evidence to a laboratory. The blood from the axe was tested. It matched Stephanie's blood type. Hair found on the axe was examined under a microscope. That hair had the same microscopic characteristics as Stephanie's hair. The blood splatters in Ricky's car also matched Stephanie's blood type. Hair sticking to a blood stain in the car matched Stephanie's hair as well. The police arrested Ricky McGinn. He was charged with capital murder. The reason it was capital murder was because he raped Stephanie before killing her. Under Texas law, murder committed during a sexual assault is punishable by death. During the trial, the jury heard from 3 other females. They testified that Ricky had sexually assaulted them in the past. One of them was his biological daughter, Latasha McGinn. She told the court what he had done to her when she was 3 or 4 years old. She also told the court about his threats to kill her and her mother. The jury found Ricky McGinn guilty of capital murder. They then decided on the punishment. They sentenced him to death. The judge officially gave him the death sentence on a date that led to him being received at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice on June 9, 1995. After the trial, Ricky began filing appeals. On January 21, 1998, the Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed his conviction and death sentence. On July 8, 1998, that same court denied his request for habeas corpus relief. On November 2, 1998, the U.S. Supreme Court denied his petition to hear the case. On January 20, 1999, a federal district court denied habeas relief. On October 22, 1999, the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals denied permission to appeal. On November 2, 1999, Ricky filed another petition with the U.S. Supreme Court. That petition was denied on February 22, 2000. Ricky was given an execution date of June 1, 2000. He ate his last meal that day. He was about 18 minutes away from being taken to the death chamber. Then Governor George W. Bush granted a 30-day reprieve. This was done so that new DNA tests could be performed. The defense lawyers believed newer technology might prove Ricky was innocent. The DNA tests were done on semen and pubic hairs found on Stephanie's body. The results came back on August 15, 2000. The DNA matched Ricky McGinn completely. The tests confirmed that he was the person who had raped Stephanie. A new execution date was set for September 27, 2000. On that day, Ricky McGinn was 43 years old. He was taken to the death chamber in Huntsville, Texas. He made a final statement. He did not talk about the crime or his guilt. He said he loved his family and believed in heaven. He told everyone to keep clean hearts and not be bitter. Then the lethal injection drugs were given. At 6:22 p.m., he was pronounced dead. After his death, authorities said Ricky McGinn was also the lead suspect in 2 other rape murders that happened before Stephanie's death. One victim was 19-year-old Christy Jo Eggers. DNA testing later showed that semen found in her body matched Ricky. The other victim was 12-year-old Sherry Newman. Ricky was never tried for those cases because he was already on death row and then executed. Janet McGinn, Stephanie's mother and Ricky's ex-wife, believed he was guilty. She supported his execution. Stephanie's killer was punished by the state of Texas. Ricky Nolan McGinn was put to death for raping and murdering his 12-year-old stepdaughter, and the case was closed when he took his last breath on September 27, 2000. Story 7. Bobby Lee Ramdas was born in Washington, D.C. in 1972. His exact birth date was never clearly recorded. He was a white male. He grew up in poor areas of Washington, D.C., and later in Fairfax County, Virginia. His mother worked as a topless dancer. She did not take good care of him. The court records later described her as neglectful. His father was a man who beat Bobby when he was a boy. The father did not believe Bobby was his real son. Because of this, the father treated Bobby badly. Bobby grew up with very little love or safety at home. Bobby's family had no money. He could not get things that other children had. He did not have a stable home life. He started getting into trouble when he was very young. When he was 13 years old, he committed his first crimes. He stole things. He broke into buildings. He carried a gun. He ran away from where he was supposed to be. As a teenager, Bobby kept breaking the law. He was caught many times. He was convicted of theft. He was convicted of burglary, which means breaking into a place to steal. He was convicted of robbery, which means taking something from a person by force. He was also convicted of having a gun when he should not have one. And he was convicted of escape, which means he ran away from custody. Bobby did not finish much school. He did not have a regular job. He did not have a normal social life. Most of his teenage years were spent in and out of juvenile detention or prison. He was poor, and he could not afford to hire his own lawyers or investigators. The state provided help, but Bobby did not trust many people. By the time he was 19 years old, Bobby had already spent years in the criminal system. He had been locked up. He had been released on parole. Parole means he was allowed to leave prison early if he followed rules. But he did not follow the rules for long. He was still angry. He still did not have money. He still did not have a normal family or a home that felt safe. In the summer of 1992, Bobby was 20 years old. He had been released from prison on parole just a few months earlier. He was living in the Fairfax County area. He did not have a steady job. He did not have a plan for his life. He spent his days on the streets. He knew people who sold drugs. He knew people who carried guns. He was still the same boy who had started stealing at age 13, but now he was a man. On July 15, 1992, Bobby Ramdas went looking for money. He knew that drug dealers often carried large amounts of cash. He found a 19-year-old drug dealer named Daryl Ferguson. Bobby wanted the money that Daryl had. Bobby pulled out a gun. But instead of stopping, Daryl tried to run away. Bobby did not like that. He fired 2 bullets into Daryl. Daryl Ferguson was gunned down in an alley. He died there. Bobby took his money and left. That was the first killing. 3 days before Bobby robbed the convenience store, he committed another violent crime. On August 30th, 1992, Bobby got into a taxi cab in Arlington, Virginia. The cab driver was a man whose name was not given in the records. Bobby rode with the driver to a certain place. Then Bobby pulled out a gun. He robbed the cab driver. After taking the man's money, Bobby shot the driver in the back of the head. He left the man lying there, believing he was dead. The cab driver did not die, but he was badly hurt. This was an attempted murder. Then came the main crime. On September 2nd, 1992, Bobby planned to rob a convenience store. He did not do it alone. He worked with 4 other people. All 5 of them took part in the robbery. The store was a 7-Eleven in Fairfax County, Virginia. The clerk working that night was a 34-year-old man from Pakistan named Muhammad Z. Kayani. Bobby went inside the store. He jumped over the counter. He pointed a .38 caliber snub-nosed pistol at Kayani's head. Bobby later said, "I told the dude to open the safe." Kayani did not say anything. He just pushed buttons on the register or the safe. He looked at Bobby. Bobby said, "I told him to stop looking at me." Bobby felt that Kayani was scared. He could see the fear in the man's eyes. Bobby told Kayani to open the safe. Kayani was not moving fast enough for Bobby. Bobby got angry. He shot Kayani in the head at very close range. After the clerk fell to the floor, Bobby stood over him. There was a witness in the store who saw what happened. The witness later testified in court that Bobby looked down at Kayani lying on the floor and said, "That's for taking too long." There were also customers inside the store. They were scared. They lay down on the floor to stay safe. Before Bobby ran out of the store, he tried to shoot the customers too. He pointed his gun at them and pulled the trigger, but the gun did not fire. It may have been out of bullets or jammed. So Bobby fled the store without hurting the customers. During the same period of summer 1992, Bobby committed many other robberies. In total, he was linked to 6 armed robberies over an 8-day crime spree. He held up 2 fast food restaurants. He also went to a place called Bragg Towers. There, He hit a clerk in the head with his pistol. This is called pistol whipping. He hurt the clerk, but did not shoot him. Every time Bobby robbed someone, he used the same .38 caliber snub-nose pistol. He pointed the gun at people's heads. He demanded money. If someone did not move fast enough, he shot them or hit them. He did not wear a disguise. He did not hide his face. He simply used fear and sudden violence to get what he wanted. By the end of September 2nd, 1992, Muhammad Kani was dead on the floor of the 7-Eleven. Bobby Ramdas had the money from the store. He left the scene with the 4 other people who helped him. He did not call for help. He did not show any regret. He went back to the streets. After the murder of Muhammad Kani on September 2nd, 1992, police arrived at the 7-Eleven store. Customers who had been lying on the floor gave descriptions of what they saw. One witness told police that the shooter had said, "That's for taking too long," while standing over the body. Police also collected physical evidence from the scene, including the fact that a .38 caliber gun had been used. The witness also described the shooter's appearance. Police began looking for a young white male who used a snub-nose pistol. Because Bobby had committed multiple robberies in a short time, he left a trail. Other store clerks and victims from the other armed robberies gave similar descriptions. Police connected the crimes to the same person. Bobby was arrested not long after the 7-Eleven murder. The exact date of arrest is not in the public records, but he was taken into custody and charged. The 4 other people who helped him in the robbery were also arrested or became witnesses. One of them was an accomplice named O'Connor. Before the trial, O'Connor took a polygraph test. The results showed that O'Connor was deceptive. He tried to make his own role in the robbery seem smaller than it really was. Prosecutors shared this information with Bobby's lawyer. Bobby's lawyer also learned that 3 people might provide an alibi defense. An alibi means proof that Bobby was somewhere else when the crime happened. But when the lawyer checked, those 3 people had made inconsistent statements. That means their stories did not match up. Because of this, the lawyer chose not to call them as witnesses at trial. Bobby went on trial for capital murder, robbery, and using a firearm in the commission of murder. The trial took place in Fairfax County. The jury heard the witness describe how Bobby shot Kani and then laughed over his body. They also heard that Bobby tried to shoot the customers afterward. The evidence was strong. On January 30th, 1993, the jury found Bobby guilty of capital murder. Now the same jury had to decide his sentence, life in prison or death. The jury asked the judge a question. They wanted to know, if the defendant is given life, is there a possibility of parole at some time before his natural life? The judge did not answer directly. He told the jury, "You should impose such punishment as you feel is just under the evidence and within the instructions of the court. You are not to concern yourselves with what may happen afterwards." In Virginia at that time, there was a 3 strikes law. If a person had 3 violent felony convictions, then a life sentence meant no parole at all. Bobby already had 2 robbery convictions from earlier in 1992. A judge had signed a sentencing order for one of those robberies only 19 days after Bobby's capital murder conviction. But at the time of the capital murder trial, that second conviction was not fully counted yet. The judge told the jury only that they should not worry about parole. The jury did not know that Bobby would never be eligible for parole if they gave him life. The jury sentenced Bobby to death. The judge agreed and formally imposed the death penalty on April 6, 1993. Bobby was sent to the Virginia Department of Corrections. After the death sentence, Bobby filed appeals. He argued that the jury should have been told he would never get parole. His lawyers later found that 3 of the jurors in the case said they would have voted for life in prison instead of death if they had known the truth about parole. But the courts did not agree to change the sentence at first. While these appeals were happening, Bobby was also tried for the murder of Darrell Ferguson from July 15, 1992. He was convicted of that murder and received a separate life sentence. This happened after the capital murder conviction. So even if the death sentence had been thrown out, Bobby would still have spent the rest of his life in prison for the other killing. Bobby's lawyers kept fighting. In 1994 and 1993, the Virginia Supreme Court upheld his death sentence in two different rulings. Later, the case went to federal courts. A federal judge in Norfolk named Raymond A. Jackson agreed with Bobby and sent the case back for a new sentencing hearing. But the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals overturned that decision. That court was one of the most conservative in the country. A judge named Francis D. Murnaghan Jr. disagreed with the majority. He wrote, "Splitting hairs when a man's life is at stake is not becoming to a judiciary or a legal system." In 1999, a similar case from South Carolina reached the U.S. Supreme Court. In that case, the court ruled that jurors must be told if a defendant will never be eligible for parole. Bobby's lawyers asked the U.S. Supreme Court to apply that ruling to Bobby. On November 23, 1999, Bobby was 3 hours away from being executed. The Supreme Court issued a stay. That means they stopped the execution to hear his appeal. But after reviewing the case, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected Bobby's appeal on June 12, 2000. The court decided that the legal technicality did not require a new sentencing. The execution was scheduled again for December 6, 2000. Bobby's lawyers then asked Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore for clemency. Clemency means mercy that stops an execution. Governor Gilmore reviewed the case. He noted that within 3 months of being released on parole, Bobby had committed 6 armed robberies, 1 attempted murder, and 2 murders. The governor also noted that after shooting K.O.N.E., Bobby had tried to shoot the customers, but his gun did not fire. On December 6, 2000, Governor Gilmore denied clemency. He said, "I decline to intervene." That same day, December 6, 2000, Bobby Lee Ramdass was executed by lethal injection in Virginia. He was 28 years old. His wife, whom he had married just 1 week earlier, visited him before the execution. When asked for a final statement, Bobby said, "Redskins are going to the Super Bowl," and then laughed. The victims' families lived with their losses. Muhammad Kani was dead. Darrell Ferguson was dead. The cab driver who was shot in the head survived, but carried his wounds. Bobby Lee Ramdass became the 668th person executed in the United States since 1976, and the 80th person executed in Virginia since that year. The story of Bobby Lee Ramdass ends with his death by lethal injection on December 6, 2000, leaving behind 2 murder victims, 1 surviving victim, and a question of whether the jury should have known the truth about parole. Story 8. Jeffrey Dillingham was born on March 6, 1973, in the United States. He was white. His parents were not wealthy, but they provided a normal home for him. There is no public record of violence, neglect, or major family problems during his childhood. Jeffrey went to school like other children. He was a good student. In fact, he was an honor student at times. Teachers saw him as a regular kid who did his work and did not cause trouble. He had friends. He was not known as a bully or a troublemaker. As Jeffrey grew into his teenage years, he stayed away from the police. He never committed a crime that was recorded. He had no arrests. He had no juvenile record. His behavior did not raise any red flags to the people around him. After finishing high school, Jeffrey got a job. He worked at a video store. This was a common job for a young person in the early 1990s. He rented movies to customers and handled the daily tasks of the store. He made some money, but he was not rich. Jeffrey had a social life. He spent time with friends. One of his friends was a young man named Brian Dennis Salter. Brian was the same age as Jeffrey. They would talk, hang out, and share ideas about their lives. Neither of them had a serious criminal past. Jeffrey also knew a teenage girl named Christy Kozlow. She was 17 years old. She was the daughter of a wealthy man named Jack Kozlow. Jack had remarried, and his new wife was named Karen Kozlow. Christy did not get along with her father after the marriage. She also did not get along with her stepmother. But at this point in the story, no crime had been planned yet. Jeffrey continued working at the video store. He lived a simple, ordinary life. He had no major achievements and no major failures. He was just a young man going through his daily routine. Nothing in his past suggested he would later become involved in violence. That was the state of Jeffrey Dillingham's life before anything changed. He was 19 years old. He had a job. He had friends. He had no criminal history. Then something new entered his life. That something new was a plan to get money. Christy Kozlow, the 17-year-old daughter of Jack Kozlow, believed she would inherit a large amount of money after her parents died. She thought she would get as much as $12 million. She did not get along with her father or her stepmother, Karen Kozlow, so she decided to have them killed. Christy went to her boyfriend, Brian Salter. Brian was also 19 years old. She told Brian that she would pay him and Jeffrey Dillingham $1 million each if they killed her parents. Brian agreed. Then Brian told Jeffrey about the offer. Jeffrey also agreed. The three of them began to plan the murder. Christy knew the house well because she lived there. She drew a floor plan of the house. The house was large, about 4,000 square feet. She showed where the parents slept. She also gave them the code to turn off the home alarm system. She told them the best way to enter through the back of the house. Jeffrey and Brian decided to commit the crime at night while the Kozlows were asleep. They chose March 12, 1992. That was 6 days after Jeffrey's 19th birthday. They dressed in black clothing, so they would be hard to see in the dark. Jeffrey took a steel pry bar. This is a long, heavy metal tool used to pull nails or break things open. Brian took a hunting knife. These were the tools they planned to use. They went to the Kozlow home in Fort Worth, Texas. The home was in an upscale neighborhood. They used the code Christy gave them to turn off the alarm system. Then they entered through a rear door. They moved quietly through the house, following the floor plan Christy had drawn. They went upstairs to the master bedroom. Jack and Karen Kozlow were both asleep in bed. The two young men entered the room. The noise woke up Jack Kozlow. He realized someone was in the room. He quickly ran to a closet where he kept a shotgun. He tried to load the gun to defend himself and his wife. But he did not have enough time. Jeffrey and Brian forced both Jack and Karen to lie face down on the floor. Then Jeffrey began to hit them with the steel pry bar. He hit Jack on the back of the head and on the neck. He hit Karen as well. Karen started to scream. Jeffrey hit her again. He hit her many times. Later, doctors counted 29 wounds on Karen's body. Most of the blows were to her neck. The blows broke her skull and her jaw. While Jeffrey was hitting them with the pry bar, Brian used the hunting knife to slash their throats. Brian straddled Karen Kozlow and cut her neck so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. Jack Kozlow's throat was also slashed. He was beaten so hard that the world went black. He lost consciousness. After the attack, Jeffrey and Brian stole items from the house. They took Jack Kozlow's wallet. They took about $200 in cash. They also took a wrist watch that was worth $1,600. Then they left the house. Karen Kozlow, age 40, died at the scene. Her body lay on the bedroom floor. Jack Kozlow was left for dead. But he did not die. After some time, he regained consciousness. He was badly injured. He had a huge, deep scar on his throat. His head was damaged. He had blind spots in his vision for many months. But he found the strength to get up. He staggered to a neighbor's house and knocked on the door. The neighbor called the police. That is how the crime was carried out. Jeffrey Dillingham had beaten 2 people with a steel bar and helped another man cut their throats. He did this for the promise of $1 million, money he never received. And he did not know the victims personally. He had never met them before that night. When Jack Kozlow showed up at the neighbor's house, the neighbor called the police right away. Officers arrived at the scene. They found Karen Kozlow dead in the master bedroom. They also found Jack Kozlow badly wounded. He was taken to a hospital for treatment. At first, the police suspected Jack Kozlow. They thought maybe he had killed his wife and then hurt himself to look like a victim. This was because there were no signs of a break-in, and the alarm had been turned off with a code. Jack was questioned, but he told the truth. 2 men had attacked them. The police did not have any other suspects for several days. Then a tip came in. Someone called the police with information. That person was a friend of Jeffrey Dillingham. After the murder, Jeffrey had given his bloody clothes and the steel pry bar to this friend to hide or get rid of. The friend kept the evidence for a while, but the guilt became too heavy. The friend went to the police and told them everything. He explained what Jeffrey had done and where the evidence was. Police arrested Jeffrey Dillingham. He was 19 years old. When officers questioned him, Jeffrey confessed. He told them the whole story. He explained that Christy Kozlow had promised $1 million. He also named Brian Salter as the other attacker. The police then arrested Brian Salter. He also confessed and told police about Christy's role. Christy Kozlow was arrested as well. She was 17 years old. She was charged as an adult because of the seriousness of the crime. The case went to trial. Jeffrey Dillingham was tried first. He was offered a plea bargain. If he testified against Christy, he would get a life sentence instead of the death penalty. Jeffrey refused the deal. He chose to go to trial. The jury heard the evidence, including his own confession. They found him guilty of capital murder. For capital murder in Texas, the punishment was either life in prison or death. The jury decided on death. Jeffrey Dillingham was sentenced to die by lethal injection. Brian Salter was offered the same deal. He accepted it. He testified against Christy Kozlow in her trial. Because of his cooperation, he received a life sentence. Christy Kozlow went to trial. The jury heard that she had planned the murders to get money, and because she did not like her stepmother. Her own father, Jack Kozlow, testified that he wanted his daughter to receive the death penalty. However, the jury did not hear that statement because it was not allowed in court. The jury decided that Christy would not be a danger in the future, so they gave her a life sentence instead of death. Jeffrey Dillingham spent more than 8 years on death row. He filed appeals. He asked higher courts to change his sentence because his accomplices got life and he got death. Each appeal was rejected. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted 16-2 against reducing his sentence to life. The United States Supreme Court also refused to stop the execution. On November 1, 2000, Jeffrey Dillingham was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas. He was 27 years old. In his final statement, he apologized for the pain he caused. He took full responsibility for Karen Kozlow's death. He was pronounced dead at 6:28 p.m. After the case ended, Jack Kozlow survived his injuries. He still had a large scar on his throat. He later remarried and continued to live in Fort Worth. He sold the house where his wife was killed. Brian Salter and Christy Kozlow both remained in prison. They became eligible for parole in 2027, which is 27 years after their original sentences. Jeffrey Dillingham's family mourned, but the story of the murder for hire was finally closed. Story 9. Kevin Dean Young was born in 1968 in Anderson County, South Carolina. His family did not have much money. His parents worked hard but still struggled to pay for food and rent. Kevin was a black male. Kevin grew up in a neighborhood with many other poor families. His parents were often busy with work. They did not have much time to watch over him. Kevin started spending time on the streets at a young age. When Kevin was a child, he did not like school. He had trouble paying attention in class. His grades were low. Teachers said he was often disruptive. By the time he was a teenager, he stopped caring about school. He started skipping classes. He finally dropped out of school before finishing high school. Kevin did not get a regular job after leaving school. He did not have any job skills. Instead, he started hanging out with older boys who were getting into trouble. These friends taught him how to steal small items from stores. Kevin was arrested for the first time as a juvenile. The charges were minor. He was released with a warning. When Kevin became an adult in 1986 at age 18, his behavior got worse. He started using drugs. He especially liked cocaine. He needed money to buy drugs. He began committing small crimes like shoplifting and stealing from cars. He was arrested several times. Each time, he was given a short jail sentence or probation. Kevin had a long criminal history for someone his age. Between age 18 and 20, he was in and out of jail. He was convicted of theft and other minor crimes. The courts put him on parole. Parole meant he was released from jail early, but had to follow rules. He had to check in with a parole officer. He was not allowed to carry a weapon. He was not supposed to break any laws. Kevin did not follow the parole rules. He continued to use cocaine. He continued to hang out with people who committed crimes. He did not look for a real job. He lived with friends or on the streets. He did not have a stable home. In the summer of 1988, Kevin was 20 years old. He was still on parole. He was spending time with two other men. Their names were William Bell and John Glenn. William Bell was also a young man who had been in trouble with the law. John Glenn was another friend. They all used drugs together. They all needed money to buy more drugs. Kevin had no plans for the future. He did not think about what would happen next week or next month. He only thought about getting his next drug fix. He was angry at the world. He felt that life had been unfair to him, but he did not try to change his situation. On the last day of August 1988, Kevin woke up with no money. He had no cocaine left. He wanted more. He met up with William Bell and John Glenn. They talked about how to get money fast. That conversation led to the events of that night. On the evening of August 31st, 1988, Kevin Dean Young was with William Bell and John Glenn. The three men were together in Anderson, South Carolina. They had been drinking alcohol. They had no money left. They wanted to buy cocaine. To get money, they decided to rob someone. A fourth man named Arthur Ray Jones joined them. Jones had a car. He agreed to drive the three men. The four men got into the car. They drove around the streets of Anderson, looking for a person to rob. They did not have a specific target. They just wanted to find someone who was alone and had a wallet. At around 10 p.m., they drove past West Franklin Elementary School. The school was located near downtown Anderson. The parking lot had one car still there. That meant someone was working late inside the building. The man inside the school was Dennis Ray Hepler. He was 35 years old. He was a white male. Dennis had just started his first year as the principal of that elementary school. He wanted to get everything ready for the students. The school year was about to begin. Dennis stayed late that night to finish his work. He had no idea that four men were watching the school from a car outside. At some point, Dennis finished his work. He locked the school doors. He walked out of the building and toward his car. He was alone in the dark parking lot. Kevin Young and William Bell got out of the car. John Glenn also got out. Arthur Ray Jones stayed behind the wheel. The three men walked toward Dennis Hepler. They surprised him as he was leaving the school steps. Kevin Young and William Bell confronted Dennis. They demanded his wallet. Dennis did not fight back. He took out his wallet and flipped it to the men. The wallet contained only $67. That was all the money Dennis had with him. Even after Dennis gave up his wallet, the men did not leave. Kevin Young pulled out a handgun. It was a .25 caliber pistol. He pointed it at Dennis. Then he fired the gun. The bullet hit Dennis in the back. Dennis fell to the ground. While Dennis was lying on the ground, William Bell took the gun, or used his own weapon. Bell fired a second shot. This bullet hit Dennis in the head. Dennis Ray Hepler died right there on the school grounds. After the shooting, the three men ran back to the car where Arthur Ray Jones was waiting. Jones drove them away from the scene. They left Dennis Hepler's body on the ground outside his school. The men drove to a place where they could buy drugs. They used the $67 they had taken from Dennis to purchase cocaine. They took the drugs and used them. The money that Dennis had worked for was spent on illegal drugs within hours of his death. Dennis Hepler was a married man. He had a wife named Brenda. He had 3 young daughters. He was also a churchgoer. He played softball on a church team. He was well liked by his students, their parents, and his fellow teachers. He had done nothing wrong. He was simply working late to get his school ready for the children. At the time of the murder, no police were at the school. No one saw the shooting happen. The 4 men drove away without being stopped. That night, no one knew who had killed Dennis Hepler, but evidence would soon be found. The night of August 31st, 1988, after Kevin Young and the others drove away, Dennis Hepler's body lay on the ground outside West Franklin Elementary School. He had been shot twice. No one saw the shooting happen, but eventually someone would find him. A short time after the shooting, a person drove past the school. That person saw a man lying on the ground. The person stopped to check and realized the man was not moving. That person called the police. Officers arrived at the school parking lot. They found Dennis Hepler's body. They also found his wallet on the ground, empty of cash. The police called an ambulance, but Dennis was already dead. The police began their investigation. They looked for witnesses. They asked people in the neighborhood if they had seen anything unusual that night. A few people remembered seeing a car driving away fast from the school area, but no one had seen the faces of the men inside. The police then looked for physical evidence. They found bullet casings near the body. They also found footprints and other marks. But the most important clue came from someone who talked. The police talked to people who knew Kevin Young and his friends. Someone gave information to the police about what had happened that night. Within a short time after the murder, the police arrested Kevin Young. They also arrested William Bell, John Glenn, and Arthur Ray Jones. All 4 men were charged in connection with the death of Dennis Hepler. The police questioned the men. John Glenn spoke to the police. He told them that the 3 men were looking for someone to rob that night. He said they were drunk, but had not planned anything specific. He also said they used the $67 to buy cocaine after the shooting. The case went to trial. In May 1989, a jury found Kevin Young guilty of murder. The same jury found that he had killed Dennis Hepler during an armed robbery. That made him eligible for the death penalty. The jury recommended death. The trial court sentenced Kevin Young to death on May 23, 1989. But Kevin Young's lawyers appealed the sentence. In 1991, the South Carolina Supreme Court said there were errors in the sentencing part of the trial. The court kept the murder conviction, but sent the case back for a new sentencing hearing. That meant a second jury would decide if Kevin should get death or life in prison. In June 1993, a second jury heard the case. This jury was made up mostly of white people, 91% white. Kevin Young was black. Dennis Hepler was white. The second jury again found that Kevin had killed Dennis during an armed robbery. They again recommended the death penalty. The judge sentenced Kevin Young to death for the second time. Kevin Young's lawyers continued to appeal. They argued that his first trial lawyer, James Mann, had not defended him properly. They said Mann acted more like a prosecutor than a defense lawyer. They also said the second jury did not have enough black members. The South Carolina Supreme Court upheld the death sentence in 1995. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear the case in 1996. While Kevin Young sat on death row for 12 years, the other men involved faced their own punishments. William Henry Bell also received a death sentence. His appeals were still pending. John Glenn was convicted of armed robbery and being an accessory. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Arthur Ray Jones pleaded guilty to being an accessory. He was sentenced to 10 years, but only had to serve 7.5 months in jail. The rest of his sentence was suspended. The victim's family suffered greatly. Dennis Hepler's wife, Brenda, was left to raise their 3 young daughters alone. But in 1993, Brenda died from breast cancer. This meant the 3 girls lost both parents. They were raised by an aunt and their grandmother. Doug Kessel, the brother-in-law of Dennis's wife, said that Kevin Young had in effect orphaned those girls. In October 2000, the South Carolina Supreme Court set an execution date for Kevin Young, November 3, 2000. His lawyers filed one last appeal, raising questions about his lawyer's qualifications. The court denied the appeal. Kevin Young asked Governor Jim Hodges for clemency. The governor refused. The United States Supreme Court also denied a request to stop the execution. On November 3, 2000, at 6:18 p.m., Kevin Dean Young was executed by lethal injection at a prison in South Carolina. 2 executioners injected 3 drugs into his arms. The first drug made him unconscious. The second drug stopped his breathing. The third drug stopped his heart. He was declared dead. He was 32 years old. After the execution, the school where Dennis Hepler was shot was closed and turned into a community center. A park was named in his honor in 1992. His former church softball teammates wore his name on their sleeves for years. The 3 daughters grew up without either parent because of one night of violence over $67. The story of Dennis Hepler's murder and Kevin Young's execution ended on that November evening, but the pain left behind for the Hepler family never truly went away.